Good evening and welcome to Dubuque County Right to Life's 28th Annual Life Dinner. Yes. It's good to be back in person this year. I'm Cassie Shetkin, Chairman of your Board of Directors. Thank you again so much for being here with us tonight. Dubuque County Right to Life is an educational organization dedicated to fostering respect for all human life from conception to natural death. It is our goal to save lives, restore protection, and regain respect for all. I'm very excited to welcome you to an evening filled with education, inspiration, and friendships. You are in for a delightful evening. I think you will be especially moved by a personal testimony from a local family and by our keynote speaker for the evening, Dr. Levatino. I want to especially welcome a few organizations that we work closely with who are present with us this evening. We are grateful for their presence tonight, but even more importantly, for the work they do in the pro-life movement, making sure that they not only talk the talk, but that we walk the walk and support and give assistance to those in need. Tonight we have representatives from the following organizations. As I announce your group, please stand and remain standing so that we can show our appreciation once everyone has risen. Iowa Right to Life. The Family Leader. Mary's Inn. Birthright. The Gabriel Project. Clarity Clinic. And Pulse, formerly known as Iowans for Life. Thank you. We also wish to extend a special welcome to two student groups that are with us tonight. We thank you for your advocacy of saving lives in your communities and spheres of influence amid learning minds. We are encouraged by your hopeful presence tonight. You are our future and the pro-life generation. We invite students from Beckman High School and Loras College's Do Hawks for Life to please stand and wave. Tonight, we also have 4 elected officials in the room who are working for life in a concrete way in Des Moines and Washington, D.C. In Des Moines, they are fighting for pro-life bills such as the Mom's Bill and the Protect Life Amendment to the Iowa Constitution. In Washington, they are fighting to preserve the Hyde Amendment so that no taxpayer funds are used for abortions, and promoting legislation that assists pregnant women in need. I'd like them to stand one at a time and have you recognize them. Iowa State Representative Dr. Stephen Bradley. Iowa State Representative Shannon Lundgren and her husband Charlie. United States Congressional Representative Ashley Hinson. And United States Senator Chuck Grassley. Although Dubuque County Right to Life is an educational organization, we know that it is of utmost importance to begin each event, each task, and each challenge with prayer. In order to accomplish our mission, we will begin with opening prayer. I'd like to welcome up Deacon Travis King. Deacon King is a deacon of the Archdiocese of Dubuque and is assigned to St. Columkill Parish here in town. He is the husband of his beautiful wife, Melissa, and father to 4 children. Deacon King is a longtime friend of our organization, and his family is very involved in many pro-life activities and events. We are grateful for his presence here tonight.
Good evening and welcome. Let's bow our heads and pray for God's blessing. God our Father, as we come before you, source and lover of life, we beg you to reawaken in us respect for every unborn life. Help us to see in the fruit of the maternal womb your miraculous work as the Creator. Open our hearts to generously welcome every child that comes into life. Bless all families, sanctify the union of spouses, render fruitful their love. Accompany the choices of legislative assemblies with the light of your Holy Spirit, so that peoples and nations may recognize and respect the sacred nature of life at every stage. Guide the work of scientists and doctors, so that all progress contributes to the integral well-being of man, and no one endures suppression or injustice. Give charity to administrators and economists, so they may realize and promote sufficient conditions for young families to embrace the birth of new children. Console the married couples who suffer because they are unable to have children or have experienced miscarriages. In your goodness, provide for them. Teach us all to care for the widow and the orphaned, so that they may experience the warmth of your charity, the consolation of your divine heart. Help us to walk with the sick, the aged, and the dying, so that they will have dignity in their suffering and the joy of knowing that you are with them through it all. And bless this meal which we are about to receive, so that it may strengthen us to carry out your will to love and serve life from conception until natural death. With Mary, our mother, in whose womb your Son took on our human nature, we humbly ask you to bless our presenters and the ongoing efforts of Dubuque County Right to Life. We ask this through your Son, Jesus, our risen Lord. Amen. By the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit.
It is my privilege to introduce our new to the life dinner executive director, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Augustine. Augustine Payne was born and raised in a town called Lombard, about 45 minutes west of Chicago. He is one of 13 children, with 2 of them in heaven. At a young age, an abortion clinic moved in just 5 minutes away from his home. His mom would take him and his siblings out there to pray on a regular basis. That abortion mill closed in January of 2020. That was great. Growing up, he would join his siblings in campaigning for pro-life politicians and joining the pro-life action leagues in their Face the Truth tours and various protests throughout the year. In 2014, Augustine, along with 2 of his brothers, would bike from Dallas, Texas to Chicago, Illinois with the Biking for Babies team, which would also mark his first time in Iowa. His second time in Iowa would be when he would serve on a congressional campaign in the summer of 2016. He left Iowa not knowing that he would be back. Augustine graduated with a degree in economics from Ave Maria University in Southwest Florida, where he met his beautiful wife, Molly, and started the university debate team. Prior to coming to Dubuque County Right to Life, Augustine worked in finance in downtown Chicago. In his free time, Augustine enjoys spending time with his wife, Molly, and their son, Maximilian, finding solutions to the world's problems with practically anyone who is willing to chat, enjoying the great outdoors, and playing any kind of sport. I know that I am speaking for the whole organization and the board of directors when I say how grateful and lucky we are to have Augustin and his family directing Dubuque County Right to Life. He brings, yes. He brings energy and vigor to the pro-life movement here in Dubuque. We have a gifted, creative leader at our helm. Please help me welcome to the podium, Augustin Payne.
Thank you for the warm welcome. Notes here. Isn't it great to be able to meet in person after 2 years? About 2 weeks ago, we received an anonymous letter in the mail at the office, and I'd like to share that letter with you. Writing this letter is something I have put off for years, but if this letter could change the decision of just one young girl/woman from having an abortion, it is worth all the pain I have every day. I cannot believe I have made the choice to end the life of an unborn child of mine. How did I do that? I can hardly remember. Very few people knew, and it seemed like it was my only option, and it was legal. It was all over so fast. I tried to put it out of my mind, but that was impossible. I tried to justify, tried to go on with life. I pray for forgiveness every day. I went to confession, but I just can't forgive myself. I pray every day that young people will make better choices. If we are, as young adults, looking up to the adults and the laws that are being made, it makes me wonder how confused our precious young minds/children must be. Continue praise for change of hearts and change of laws. Jesus, I trust in you. Anonymously yours in Christ. I share that with you because this story tells the story of so many women who have had an abortion. One of the hardest parts about receiving this letter and it being anonymous is that I couldn't pick up the phone and connect her to our annual Rachel's Vineyard retreat or our monthly Healing Our Hearts post-abortion support group. One of the things that stuck with me when I was applying to Dubuque County Right to Life was that they offered help for those who have been harmed by abortion. The harm that this mother describes in this letter is unfortunately not uncommon among those who have been involved in abortion. And this hurt is exactly what we are trying to prevent with our educational efforts. But just think, we are part of an organization that not only educates on the harms of abortion, but we are still there for the men and women who have had abortions or been affected by them somehow. That they will know that this life is still worth living and that healing is possible. It is great that we no longer have an abortion clinic here in Dubuque, thanks to your unwavering efforts 6 years ago and many years before that. So, yeah, give a round of applause. But unfortunately, we still have an abortion problem. We have vulnerable women and men who are going through other measures to have abortions. Based on Iowa statistics, I was shocked when I learned that there were over 107 mothers who had an abortion in 2020. There were 110 mothers who had an abortion in 2019. This does not count if they were to have an abortion done in Illinois, because my good old home state stopped reporting in 2019. I live for the day when the same report is released and Dubuque County's number is 0. This starts with educating the public, but especially our young people, on the development of the unborn, harms of abortion, and that there are local life-affirming options available: Birthright, Clarity Clinic, and Mary's Inn. On March 25th of this year, someone who most of us here in the room know and love, attorney and board member Art Galloon, here in the front, and myself went to spend the day at Beckman High School. We spoke to over 150 students that day. We brought the little rubber babies, like you see here, that are about 12 weeks old, something they could take with them. We brought our fetal model set that's out in the lobby so they could see the progression of life at the school. We showed animated videos of human development, but also of one of explaining the most common abortion procedure that happens in the United States. We gave them pamphlets to take home, reiterating that information so that way they had something to take with them. This is some of the feedback that they shared a few days later when asked what they learned. Stages of pregnancy, what a baby can do in the womb, when the brain forms, the heart beats for the first time. What resources are available, what we need to do to help people with an unexpected pregnancy. How brutal abortion is. The court cases got explained. Abortion is legal up until the point of birth. The presenters made it understandable for us. Thanks for not sugarcoating the information, being honest. The little baby fetal models that were brought. This is what I get to do for a living to support my family. To educate the young on the most important issues of our time and build a culture that respects life. None of it would be possible without your support. Another thing we do to educate the youth is our annual scholarship, essay, and speech contest. The judging evaluation takes into consideration the essay, their presentation skills, their past pro-life involvement, and a letter of recommendation. This year's theme was how abortion and euthanasia destroy the respect of disabled individuals. I thought our contestants did amazing. Our judges also must have thought the same thing, as they awarded two $2,000 scholarships, one $1,800 scholarship, and one $1,500 scholarship. We live streamed the contest. The Facebook video reached over 900. Many, many people got to experience the great work and witness these kids are to the pro-life cause. Let's give a warm welcome to two of our contestants, and I'd like to ask them to stand. Here with us tonight, Kaylee Coos from Marquette High School. And Natalie Clemon from Dubuque Senior High School. The other two winners, who regretfully couldn't be here due to school conflicts, were Holly Schmidt from South Winneshiek High School and Johnny Freund from Wahlert Catholic High School. We received a postcard the other day from one of the winners, and it says, "Dear Dubuque County Right to Life, thank you for your generous scholarship to support my future education. I am so excited to continue my schooling at Iowa State and be a witness to life there. I'm grateful for the opportunity you gave me to speak for the voiceless. Again, thank you." That is thanks to all of you. I share that because that is your hard-earned dollars that are going to allow these kids to continue their education at the next level and be pro-life witnesses. I'm excited to be a part of the team here at Dubuque County Right to Life. As I mentioned earlier, every day I get to go to work, and everything I do is to build a culture of life and address the most important issue of our time. Whether it's educating the young, helping women and men heal from past abortion, forming both educational and family fun events, the list goes on. When this job has obstacles, as every job does, it helps to push through these obstacles when I'm reminded of why Dubuque County Right to Life exists. To be a champion for the unborn and those with terminal illness by educating the public that every life, every single human life, has value. So I thank the Board of Directors for the opportunity to lead Dubuque County Right to Life. And I thank you, because I wouldn't be here and able to do this as my full-time job without your support. So again, thank you. So our next speaker for tonight, unfortunately, it is Kelly Pulse, but unfortunately her husband Mark Pulse could not be here. Mark is suffering with ALS, and it was his goal to be here. But Kelly is here to give witness to the life that her and Mark are living by being in this culture that does not value suffering and still living out each day to its fullest. If you recall, ALS is the same disease that Lou Gehrig had. And I would say that Mark and Lou Gehrig have two things in common at least, and that is they're both battling ALS, and that the other is that they're both continuing to see the blessings of life while doing it. And that is evident in the introduction that Kelly shared with me. God brought the Pulse and Beaker families together 14 years ago. What a gift. God is so kind. In January of 2021, a year ago this past January, Mark got the first diagnosis of ALS, a terminal illness for which there is no cure. Seeking a second opinion, we were referred to Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. There we would receive a second diagnosis of ALS. We were advised to go make memories and to start preparing for the disease that would eventually take everything away from Mark, including his life. In that time since diagnosis, Mark is now completely wheelchair-bound. His breathing and strength continue to weaken daily. God has given us so many blessings and graces in the journey. I'd like you to join me in welcoming to the stage Kelly Pulse.
Good evening. Oh, I can tell you something. It is a privilege to stand in front of all of you. We are part of the pro-life movement. None of us sits here by chance, do we? We were chosen. God said, you were born for a time like this, a time where culture looks at us and wants to define our value by how much money we may make or what we look like. But we know that we are so much more. God gave us a purpose. God doesn't make junk. God made us for a reason. And he looks at us each and every day and says, what are you gonna do with the gift of life I've given you? God is good. Yes. He's abundantly good. As Augustine said, my name is Kelly Poles. My husband was going to join me tonight, but unfortunately the illness of ALS does not come with convenience, and it does not come with the guarantee that he can show up. But God told me, would you please still come? And I said yes, because I know that we all know the value of life. And sometimes, even beyond the womb, we need to remember the ripple effect that happens when we value life. My husband was also in the womb once. So was I. And so are our beautiful 5 children here on earth. We have an additional 3 up in heaven praying for all of us now. What a gift. What a gift. ALS can take your life away, but you can choose to do something so much bigger with it. As Mark and I prayed after that second diagnosis, we looked at each other and we said, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to rise above it? And guess what God did? Through the sacraments of grace, God shone his sacred face. And he said, I'm going to help you through it. I'm not going to abandon you on the journey. And he gave us the perfect example with Jesus, didn't he? On that road to Calvary, what did we see? Was Jesus alone? No, not once. He was given so many beautiful souls to accompany him on that road to Calvary. Were there dips in the road? Did he fall? He did. And yet he is the Savior of the world. And he did that with suffering. He did that with his yes. And that yes became because of Mary's yes. Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. Be it done unto me according to thy word. You have ALS. What are you going to do about it? Behold, God, we are the handmaids of the Lord. Be it done unto us according to thy word. Suffering is hard. Seeing this strong 6'4" man, 340 pounds, suddenly become a man who can no longer work. He can no longer stand. He can no longer use the restroom by himself. He can't shower himself. He can't brush his own teeth. He's left in a very vulnerable position. And what do we do about it? Well, I know what I'm going to do. 14 years ago, May 17th, I stood before God and man, and I said, I am going to love you in sickness and in health, in rich or poor, till death do us part. And I meant those vows, and I still mean them today. We live in a culture that is so easy to throw away those most vulnerable. But we are being called to be an advocate every day for our spouses, for our friends, for our family, for our friends. And that starts in our homes. And that starts in our marriages. And those blessings of our marriages become the future. Dubuque County Right to Life does so much. They advocate, they educate, and they help us to see the beautiful culture of life, the blessings of life within us and within the people surrounding us. All is gift. So we need to take this suffering. We got to take that cross up, don't we? Because if we can let God do his will, and we can bring that value back to life. When we start to honor those in the womb and those that are most vulnerable, guess what? That beautiful ripple effect doesn't just stop there. Because your children and your children's children and your children's children's children get to feel the effects of your yes to life. And our communities will be blessed because of it. My children get to witness the effects of Dubuque County Right to Life coming forward and saying, how can we help you carry this cross? They have provided us a beautiful meal train. They come twice a week, and it is just such a gift because they're such faithful people. I'm kind of a girl that goes into a rut with my meals, and I make the same thing every week. Anybody else do that? So my husband's kind of excited because we get to try something new. We all have our gifts. No, Dubuque County Right to Life has had a wonderful face in the community for the unborn. And I'm grateful that we get to be the pilot couple that gets to show that Dubuque County Right to Life doesn't just value the unborn, but also those in such vulnerable stages of life. All life is valuable. So tonight, ladies and gentlemen, as you look at your hearts and talents and service that you want to give back to this beautiful organization, I want you to look at the person sitting next to you. I want you to look at your spouse. Think about your children and your friends. And how much value do they add to your life? Give that contribution to Dubuque County Right to Life so that they can continue to add that value to our lives. Someday, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to behold the face of Jesus. And when we support life and all that he does to make it for us, he will say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Lou Gehrig would close that famous speech that we all know with, "I may have had a tough break, but I have an awful lot to live for." I would say that despite our culture going another direction, Mark and Kelly are living that out. Let's give them another round of applause. Our next speaker is a graduate of Albany Medical College of Union University. He began his career as an OB-GYN in 1980. He worked in private practice for 10 years before electing to return to his alma mater to pursue a law degree. During his law studies, he clerked for a prominent medical malpractice defense firm whose clients included primary hospitals as well as practicing physicians. After law school, he returned to medicine, both as a practitioner and as a professor. He has since distinguished himself within the pro-life movement, serving both as a medical witness as well as an advocate for the unborn and women in crisis pregnancies. Beginning in 2000, he worked both in private practice and in medical administration for 16 years, while also serving as medical director for 2 local pregnancy resource centers. He continues to serve as clinical professor at Burrell College of Osteopathic Medicine, which is affiliated with New Mexico State University. He has received several faculty teaching awards, has provided expert witness testimony in court cases across the country, has testified before various congressional committees on 5 occasions, most notably regarding the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. You may also have recognized him from his role as Dr. Number One in the movie Unplanned. Unless you think his life is all work and no play, he is also an amateur astronomer and a proficient, gotta work on that word, and a proficient private pilot with over 1,000 hours of flying time. He and his wife currently reside in Arizona. This evening, he'll share his unique perspective on why a physician who has been trained to nurture life would take it away. Please join me in welcoming our 28th annual Life Dinner speaker, Dr. Anthony Levatino.
Good evening. Great seeing such a big crowd. How many people are at a pro-life function like this for the first time? Raise your hands. Glad to have you all here. Welcome. My wife sometimes speaks with me. She regrets she could not be here tonight. I was telling some people at the table that means I usually get the stories I can't tell when she is around, but I've decided to skip those. The story I'm about to tell you is not an easy one to listen to, and I promise you it's not an easy one to tell. But I also promise you that everything I'm telling you is firsthand and true. I know that in a crowd this size, there are many people that have been touched by abortion in one of many, many ways. Please understand there is no condemnation from me. I'm the last person in this room who should condemn anyone. What's this all about? Why does Dubuque Right to Life exist? Why is this important? I want you to imagine for a minute, if you can, that you're an obstetrician gynecologist like me. And I want you to imagine, if you can, that you're a pro-choice obstetrician gynecologist like I used to be. Your patient today is 17 years old. She's 20 weeks pregnant. Now, if you could see her baby, and that's easy on an ultrasound, her baby would be the length of your hand, from the tip of your middle finger to your wrist. That's head to rump on a 20-week baby, not counting the legs and arms. But she's asleep on an operating room table right now, and you're there to help her with her problem. Her uterus is all the way up to her umbilicus. She's been feeling her baby kick for 2 weeks. But as I said, you're there to help her with her problem. You walk into the operating room scrubbed and gowned, and on the right is a table with your instruments. I know this is a big room and it's hard to see, but the first thing you reach for is a suction catheter. This is a 14 French suction catheter. It's about 11 inches long and it's clear plastic. And picture yourself, if you could, putting this up through the cervix into the uterus, and instruct your circulating nurse to turn on the suction machine. What you'll see is pale yellow fluid running through the tubing into the machine. That was the amniotic fluid that was there to protect the baby. Now, if she were only 12 weeks pregnant or less, a 12-week baby is the width of your hand from head to rump, not counting the legs. You could pretty much do the entire abortion with this one instrument. Babies this big don't fit through catheters this size. So you'll reach for your Sofer clamp, so you don't have to imagine when I brought it along. It's about 13 inches long, it's stainless steel, it's a heavy instrument, and the business end is about 2.5 inches long and 1/2 inch wide with rows of sharp teeth. This is a grasping instrument, and when it gets a hold of something, it does not let go. A second trimester D&E abortion that I'm describing can be done with an ultrasound, but most doctors, me included, didn't bother using them. It doesn't help that much, frankly. It's a blind procedure. You do it all by feel. So picture yourself putting this up through the cervix. Be very careful not to perforate the back wall of the uterus. It's easy. and grab a hold of anything you can blindly and pull, and feel yourself pulling, and I do mean hard. And out pops a leg about that big, which you put down on the table next to you. And reach in again, grasp and pull hard. Out comes an arm about the same length, which you put down on the table. And reach in with the same instrument again and again, and tear out the spine, the intestines, the heart, and lungs. Baby that age, the head on a baby that age is about the size of a plum. You can't see it, as I said, if you're not using an ultrasound, but pretty sure you've got it if you've got a hold of something and your fingers are spread as far as they'll go. You know you did it right if you crush down on the instrument and white material runs out of the cervix. That was the baby's brains. Now you can pull out skull pieces. Sometimes the little face comes back and stares back at you. Congratulations. You just successfully performed a second trimester D&E abortion. You just affirmed her right to choose. You just made the equivalent in today's dollars of over $2,000 legally in 15 minutes. I graduated from medical school in 1976, and if you asked me at the time how I felt about the abortion issue, I would not have hesitated for a second to tell you I was pro-choice. This is a decision between a woman, her doctor, and nobody, including the baby's father, has anything to say about it. You know, a lot of people identify themselves as pro-life or pro-choice. For a lot of people, it doesn't really affect their lives directly. It doesn't even affect how they vote. But when you're an obstetrician gynecologist and you say you're pro-choice, this isn't some vague political position. You have to decide whether you're going to actually learn to do those procedures. So in my training, right along with learning to do deliveries, hysterectomies, and all the stuff that obstetrician gynecologists do, I learned to do abortions. This is the late 70s. We had a clinic that met in the hospital at the time. Mostly younger patients, and if they were 12, maybe 13 weeks pregnant from their last period or less, we would bring them in for suction D&C abortions. There was no medication abortions at the time. And that's still the majority, even today, the majority of first trimester abortions are done that way. If they were more than 13 weeks pregnant, we'd make them wait a few weeks and we'd bring them back for saline abortions. So we don't do these anymore, but suffice it to say that these women had to go through labor. And it would take anywhere from 8 to 36 hours for them to deliver their usually dead children. But hey, I'm an obstetrician. I'm training to be an obstetrician gynecologist, and every doctor, abortionist or not, wants the same thing: happy, healthy patients. It was during my first week of training that my first year of training, that I went down. I was working at night, went down to the cafeteria on a break, and an attractive young nurse came and sat down next to me, who was about a year later to become my wife. Actually, I break what I said. I will say something I can't say when she's around. We've been married 44 years, but I do remember the exact first words we spoke to each other. They were, "Are you a doctor?" "Yes, I am." "Write me a prescription for Valium." It's been the same ever since. She was having a very bad night. She hates that story. She says, "People think I'm a drug addict. They know you're not a drug addict." We started dating and found out really quickly that we were on opposite sides of this issue. Now, New York had the distinction of having legalized abortion 3 years before Roe versus Wade. And when my wife was training as a nurse, she was asked, would you be willing to assist these procedures? And she said, absolutely not. She wanted no part of abortion. And that was the end of it as far as she was concerned. She was, she was one of the first nurses trained to do renal transplants and had nothing to do with obstetrics and gynecology, so she figured that was the end of it until we met. But as I said, it didn't take long for us to find out we were on opposite sides of this issue. And that's when we made the first and biggest mistake and dumbest mistake you can make in a relationship together. Instead of talking it out, instead of coming to some kind of resolution, we found it more comfortable to just ignore it, and we didn't talk about it. And it kind of became an unspoken rule for us not to discuss this. And that set up a pattern that went on way too long. But we got married after about a year, and like many young couples, wanted to set off and have a family of our own, and found out very quickly that we had an infertility problem. She was just not getting pregnant. I sent her to the best infertility specialist in town. Any woman in this room who has been through an infertility workup knows that it is difficult, painful, embarrassing, frustrating. And she would come home from those visits, lock herself in the bathroom and cry, because two ironies were not lost on her. One, here she is married to an obstetrician and she can't get pregnant herself. Two, here she is trying to get pregnant and her husband's killing babies doing abortions. But as soon as that thought came in, she'd push it out. She'd been through one surgical procedure, and after a lot of effort, her doctor told us there was one more surgical procedure he could try. It should take about an hour and a half. And when he walked out of the operating room 4.5 hours later, he came up to me, and I can still see him, and I can still see the wallpaper on the walls, when he said, "Look, I never tell anyone that they're not going to be able to have a baby of their own, but don't count on it." We were devastated. We both came from big families, and having children was just the most natural thing in the world. After we got over that shock, we decided, okay, well, if this is the way it is, we'll adopt a child. We'd be perfectly happy to take a baby and adopt and bring in and raise as our own child. And anyone who's tried to adopt a baby knows how difficult that is. We went through state agencies, religious agencies, county agencies, anywhere we could. And after months of effort, the best we could do was get on a 5-year waiting list to get on the waiting list. It was during that time that I had the first doubts about abortion. It was strictly selfish. But here I am, it was a ridiculous dual existence. You know, during the day I'm doing abortions. I said when it was my turn to do them, I'd do 3, 4, 5 in the morning, never thought anything of it. But at night when I go home, I'm trying to find one more phone number to call to see if there's a baby that we can find to adopt. As I said, it was strictly selfish, but I remember a specific abortion, looking down at those body parts and thinking, gosh, you know, I'm just throwing these kids in the garbage. Wouldn't even one of these women allow us to take her child home and care for as our own? But of course, it doesn't usually work that way. After months of that frustration, I came up with what my wife still credits after all these years as the best idea I've ever come up with in our marriage, beside my asking her to marry me, and that was, hey, look, this is stupid. We're getting nowhere through the normal channels. I know 50 obstetricians on a first-name basis. Let's just advertise. Maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe some kid will fall between the cracks and we'll be able to get an adoption that way. And that's exactly what we did. And in August of 1978, I was working in the operating room when the circulating nurse came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, you know, and was holding up a piece of paper. And all it said was, call Marcia as soon as you're done. Now, Marcia was the head of social services at the medical center where I was working. That's all the note said, but I knew what it meant. And sure enough, she informed me there was a 15-year-old girl in labor in the delivery room. She'd had no prenatal care. The first time she saw a doctor was the day before. But her parents have taken good care of her. She's healthy. The baby appears healthy. She wants to give her baby up for adoption. Are you interested? Yeah, of course I was interested. I remember staring at the face of the telephone to call my wife with this news and know that I was just 7 digits away from becoming a father. And literally, by the grace of God, we were able to adopt a little girl that we named Heather in August of 1978. Fantastic. We finally have a baby. And after all the years, and after all the tears, and after all the doubts, we finally had a baby, and my wife got pregnant the very next month. And our son Sean was born in July 1979. Sean and Heather were figuratively and literally close. Anyone who didn't know Heather was adopted would look at the two of them and go, 10 months apart? Man, you didn't give your wife much of a break, did you? I got the proverbial millionaire's family. I got a son and a daughter. And any doubts I had about doing abortions simply evaporated, and I went back to business as usual. I graduated from my residency program in 1980. We went down to the west coast of Florida for a year, found out pretty quickly that a young couple with young kids didn't belong in a retirement community. We laugh about that now because we live in a retirement community. And I moved back to upstate New York, and I set up practice with a physician I had trained with. Now, understand something. We were not running an abortion clinic. This is a routine OBGYN office like most women in this room have been to. We did everything. We did deliveries, we did hysterectomies, but abortion was a part of our practice. Bill and I were practiced abortionists, and this was going to be a part of our practice. Now, at the time in the early 80s, those of us in the abortion industry were looking for a better method of second trimester abortion, the late ones. The saline abortions that I mentioned before are they're dangerous. They were difficult on patients, difficult on staff, expensive because of the prolonged hospital stays. It was just hell on wheels. And we wanted a method of late term or second trimester abortion that was like D&C. We wanted a method where the patient would go to sleep and when she woke up it would all be over. And this is when D&E abortions were being developed. Now a lot of physicians in Albany, New York, where I worked, did abortions, but nobody wanted to touch that procedure. It was tricky. So we saw an opportunity. So we trained ourselves to do that type of abortion, and as a result, we were getting referrals from other doctors as well as our own patients. Over the next 4 years, I did 1,200 abortions. Over 100 were the second trimester abortions that I described. But hey, life's good. Kids are grown, we're finally making some money. We could afford a home, we could afford some furniture, and life was just grand until June 23rd, 1984. June 23rd was a Saturday. It was a beautiful day in Albany. I was on call, but it wasn't too busy. I made rounds and got to spend the rest of the day with my family. Took the kids to an amusement park that afternoon, had dinner together, and that evening the kids were playing in the backyard when we had friends come over for cake and coffee. We were talking with our friends, and at 7:25 that night, we heard the screech of brakes out in front of the house. Kids had gone on the road. Heather had been hit by a car. She was a mess. We ran out and did everything we could. I'm a doctor. I'm supposed to be able to save people's lives. My wife is an intensive care nurse. This is our work. But it made absolutely no difference, and she literally died in our arms in the back of an ambulance that night. If you have kids, you may think you have some idea of what that would feel like. If you haven't been through this yourself, you haven't got a clue. I hope you never find out. But what do you do after a disaster? You bury your child, you take some time off, and then you try to get back into your life. And I don't remember how long it was after Heather's death, but I showed up at OR number 9 at Albany Medical Center just like I had over 100 times before for a second trimester D&E abortion. I wasn't thinking of this as anything special. It was routine. Besides, I had other things on my mind. And I started that abortion, and I put that Sofer clamp in, and I ripped out an arm or a leg, and I just stared at it in the clamp, and I got sick. You know, earlier I talked about stacking up body parts on the side of the table. That's not to gross out the people that came to the dinner. When you do an abortion, you have to keep inventory. You have to make sure that you get 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces, because if you don't, your patient will come back infected, bleeding, or dead. So I finished that abortion. And I know that it sounds strange, but I promised you earlier that everything I'm telling you is firsthand and true. For the first time in my career, after all those abortions and all those years, I really looked at that pile of body parts on the side of the table. And I didn't see her wonderful right to choose, and I didn't see what a great doctor I was helping her with her problem. And I didn't even see the $2,000 cash I just made in 15 minutes. All I could see was somebody's son or daughter. And it occurred to me in that moment that this patient had come to me figuratively, never literally, and said, here's $2,000, kill my son or daughter. And I was the kind of person that would look her straight in the eye with no compunction at all, say, sure, I'll do that. Well, needless to say, we were in a crisis. I had told you earlier that we made a mistake early on not talking about the abortion issue. The problem with that is when you don't talk about one important topic, it becomes too easy to set up a pattern where you don't talk about other important topics. And we'd been drifting apart. And with Heather's death, everything broke wide open. I didn't just stop. I mean, I knew why I felt bad. I'll get over this. But my wife always knew when I had abortions scheduled the next day because I was an absolute SOB to be around. I was angry and I hurt. And I got into a blame game. It was the girl's fault for getting pregnant. It was the hospital's fault for allowing them. It was the nurse's fault for scheduling them. Everybody else's fault but mine. Isn't that always the way? And after putting up with that for a few months, she'd had it up to there. And unbeknownst to me, she'd packed a bag and she was 5 minutes away from walking out with our son. But self-expression is not one of my wife's problems, if you know her. She's Irish, I'm Sicilian. Trust me, we could have very interesting discussions at times. But she was going to have her say. And she broke our unspoken rule when she looked at me and said, you know what? It's not the girl's fault. It's not the hospital's fault. And it's not the nurse's fault. It's your fault. You stupid idiot. If this is bothering you so much, why don't you just quit? Well, that was the opening salvo in what turned into a 2-hour discussion about what was going on. I'm happy to say she didn't leave. And the next day I went to my partners and told them I would no longer do any more second trimester D&E abortions. It was just too difficult. I would just do the little ones, meaning the suction D&Cs that we did in the office in the first trimester. And I soldiered on doing those for a few months. I was hard-headed. I was dedicated, like I said. But a change had occurred that I couldn't take back. I know you look up to physicians. You think we're all so smart. We're no different than you are. When you finally figure out, here, not here, that killing a baby this big for money is wrong, it doesn't take you too long to figure out it doesn't matter whether the baby is this big or even this big. It's all the same. You know, when I talk to especially students, I try to remind them of something. It is so easy to talk about disposing of someone else's life. Today you're an adult. Once you were a child, you don't look anything like you do today. Once you were a baby. Once you were this big, but it was always you. And as I said, I'm ashamed to say it, but it was February of 1985. It was that long. And I finally went back to my partners a second time, and I told them I would no longer do any abortions, and I never did another one after that. Stop doing abortions, now you know why I quit. Get involved in the pro-life movement? Not a chance. You see, everyone in the abortion industry knows that everyone in the pro-life movement is a kook. I know this because CNN tells me so. They would never lie to me. Maybe 8 or 9 months after I stopped doing abortions, my wife came to me and told me that we'd been invited to a pro-life potluck dinner by somebody at our church. And I laughed. You know, it was a Friday night, as a matter of fact, coincidentally. And I had an easy out. We had another engagement to go to. But I said, you know, why would I want to go to some pro-life dinner with a bunch of kooks? I said that literally. But as it coincidentally turned out, and I understand coincidences better now, the pro-life potluck dinner was on the road to where we were going. We had to pass it to get where we were going. So when we were driving, I looked at her and I said, you know what, just for giggles, let's stop at the pro-life potluck dinner. We'll stay 10 minutes and we'll get out of there. And that night, the ex-abortionist and his wife walked into this pro-life potluck dinner, and it looked like a scene in a bad movie. Everybody looked up, the place went dead quiet. I had no idea these people knew who I was, but they did. And some of them didn't know that I wasn't doing abortions. I didn't take on an ad, I just quit. Well, we ended up spending an hour and a half at the pro-life potluck dinner. Guess what? These people weren't kooks. They understood the medicine, they understood the law. They were giving of their time and talent voluntarily and sacrificially to stop what they saw as one of the worst human rights abuses of our time. And we were really impressed by this, and we joined that group called Citizens Concerned for Human Life in Albany, New York. And it was sometime after that that I started speaking. The biggest thing I did early on, about a year and a half after that, was Chicago and Joe and Ann Schuyler at the Pro-Life Action League. They had a presentation called Meet the Abortion Providers, and that was the first time I spoke before in something other than a local audience. You can listen to this, and I can appreciate if you go, okay, great, he's a doctor, she's a nurse, so what's it got to do with me? This is such a big issue, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm an accountant, I'm not in medicine. I take care of my kids. I work for the post office. How many people in this room, and I mean this sincerely, believe they can do anything with God behind them? I'm going to challenge you to act that way. The power of one person. 1983. I'm still doing abortions on a regular basis. I arrive at my office and I see something that no abortionist wants to see. Our office is being picketed by the local Christian crazies. And people ask all the time, what's it like? What are you thinking when we're out there picketing? I say, I'll tell you what it's like. It gives you a siege mentality. It's us against you kooks outside. And it was then that I got a new patient named Susan. She was in her mid-30s, didn't even come up to my shoulders. Came in for a routine GYN exam, pap smear, no big deal, as a new patient. And when it was over, she said, can I talk to you? Now, doctors in the room know this is not that unusual. A lot of patients, and I think particularly women, new patients will not tell you what's really on their mind until they develop some level of trust. So I sat her down and very professionally look at this woman and say, you know, how can I help you? And she blows me away when she says, I've been sent here to give you a message that Jesus loves you. He cares about you. This is not what he had intended for your life, to be an abortionist. Please stop. Well, believe me, doctors listen to their patients. But people are very demonstrative, and it's not like my wife and I never darken the inside of a church either. But people who are very demonstrative about their faith always made me uncomfortable. And I had one overwhelming thought when this woman said this, and that was, I got to hustle this kook out of my office as fast as I could, and I did. A year later, she showed up for her GYN exam and a pap smear. And when it was over, she said, can I talk to you? I went, oh, no. She did it again, almost word for word. I've been sent here to give you a message that Jesus loves you. He cares about you. This is not what he had intended for your life, to be an abortionist. Please stop. Now, believe me, I remembered what she had said the year before. But in the intervening year, between those two visits, I'd received at least 3 personal greeting cards from this woman, marked confidential, and when I opened it up, the message was written on the card. One time during the intervening year, I arrived at my office and there was a plate of brownies on my desk with the message tied to the brownies. How long would you evangelize somebody who thought you were nuts? She's not stupid, she knew what I thought. How long would you evangelize someone who thought you were crazy? She did it for 7 years. 7 years. I left my practice in 1990, so when I went to law school. There was a lot going on. Abortion, see, when I stopped doing abortions, the partners were perfectly understanding. They knew what was going on. But when my wife and I got involved in the pro-life movement, that was not cool. We lost every friend we had. The phone stopped ringing, the invitations dried up. It was a very, very lonely time. But God was good, because he filled our life. He just said, great, now he gave us a whole bunch of pro-life friends. And we developed some new friends along the way. And there had been a lot going on in the practice over those years, but finally enough was enough, and I left in 1990. I had been speaking more and more. It built up as the time went by. And God was very good, and I mean this, because those pro-life friends really helped bring us closer to Him. They became a Christian example for us of what that kind of life was. And it's something we'd never been exposed to, and they really helped us on that road to Him. And He put many people in front of us, but I always remember one in particular. It was just a few months after I left my practice. I was living in Albany, New York. I crossed the state line into Vermont on a Saturday morning and did a presentation in a high school gymnasium. Maybe 60 people showed up. And when it was over, this woman, another short woman in her 70s, came up, chattering away at high speed, being very gracious. "Oh, thank you so much for coming and giving us a presentation. And isn't it beautiful what Jesus is doing in your life?" And I go, "Oh, God, another one." And I felt like a fraud. I didn't want this lady to think that I was something that I wasn't. So after what I hope was an eloquent presentation, I looked down at her and stemmed and stammered like an idiot and said, "Well, ma'am, I don't feel about Jesus the way you do." I'll never forget. She stopped chattering, looked up, got a big smile on her face, and she goes, "He knows you, sweetie. He's going to get you sooner or later." And she walked away. And He did. The minister that brought us the last bit of that journey didn't know any of this, but he's very experienced, and he said, in my experience, a lot of people help you on the road to Christ. He had no idea. He said, "Wouldn't it be great to go back and thank some of them?" And of course, the first person I thought of was Susan. She'd been keeping up her one-woman war for 7 years. So I invited her out to lunch. When I took this woman out to lunch, I found out a couple of things I didn't know before. First, she was one of those people picketing my office in 1983. And I would have never understood it before, but I understood it now. And she said, "I can't explain it to you, but I felt very strongly called to go to you specifically and give that message." And I fought it. I didn't want to patronize an abortionist. She said, "But the more I fought it, the more I felt I was supposed to do it, so I did, even though I know what you thought of me." And that's the kind of friends we were able to make over all those years. I'm going to show you a short video. Just how bad is it out there? What's it turned into? I'm going to show you a short video. I promise it's nothing gruesome. This was shown in the House Judiciary Committee. You've seen the cat and dog fight that started. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. This is a recording made by Live Action in a late-term abortion clinic in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where a woman comes in, is with Live Action, who was 27 weeks pregnant. When she made the initial phone call, she asked about an abortion. They said they'd be happy to handle it, no problem. And that it would cost $8,000 because she was 25 weeks pregnant, but it was $1,000 a week for every abortion, or $1,000 a week for every week after that increase. So in the end, it was a $10,000 abortion, and they've got her laboring alone in a hotel room with no supervision by a nurse or a doctor. And that's what they do in Albuquerque, New Mexico for $10,000. It's perfectly legal. It is absolutely disgusting. It is dangerous medically. There's a reason we have women labor in hospitals, because your blood pressure can go out of control, hemorrhage can occur, it's bad. Yet this is perfectly legal. On December 1st, I was in front of the Supreme Court, along with almost 100 pro-life OBGYNs from the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, of which I was a member of. I was on the board of that organization, served for 5 years. And we were there to be a pro-life physician witness on the day that the Dobbs case was argued in front of the Supreme Court. We don't know how the court's going to rule on this. It'll come down probably in June. I'm not getting my hopes up. I've had my hopes up so many times over the last 30 years, I can't tell you. But if any case is going to make a difference in abortion, this is the one. They might not change abortion law at all. They might say that, okay, this particular law fits in within undue burden, therefore it's okay. Or they might just say no to Roe v. Wade entirely and overturn it. Obviously, that's what I hope it'll do. We'll see. So if Roe v. Wade gets overturned this summer, abortion's over, right? No, you're way too sophisticated to understand that. All that does is turn it back to the states. It won't be any different in New York. It won't be any different in Illinois. It won't be any different in New Mexico, having women labor alone in hotel rooms for $10,000. California's already announced that they will be an abortion haven, whatever that means. The state, it will become a state-by-state fight. And what's really going to happen, what I see happening, we all do, is it's going to turn into mail-order abortion now with abortion pills. You know, I live in Arizona. This is one of the reasons we don't live in New Mexico anymore. Frankly, we got tired of the politics, and I won't get in any more in politics. It's a good way to get a fight going. But in Arizona, we've got a trigger law. If they overturn Roe versus Wade, the next day abortion is illegal in Arizona. And, God bless our legislature, that wasn't good enough. So they knew they had the trigger law, but on top of that, they passed a 15-week restriction just like Mississippi had in case they say, well, okay, we'll just go with that. But many places in the country are not like that. It's the Right to Life organizations, and it's the pregnancy assistance centers across this country that have been and will remain the backbone and the strength of the pro-life movement. You realize there are more crisis pregnancy centers in this country than abortion clinics? They don't tell you that, do they? And I teach in medical school, and even though I've been retired for 4 years, I still go back to New Mexico 1 month out of the year to teach the medical students. And the reason I do it is, A, I like teaching, but B, I think it's important for students to see a pro-life physician because they have so much pressure put on them. And they think they're the, if they're pro-life, they think it's some big secret and they're the only ones. So the next time somebody comes at you, or to the politicians in the room, the next time somebody gets in front of you and says, abortion is health care and it's absolutely essential, just ask one easy question. Sir, ma'am, if abortion is so necessary, if abortion is so essential, why do over 85% of obstetricians and gynecologists refuse to do them? A simple question. It's organizations like Dubuque County Right to Life that are going to still be in the forefront of the abortion fight because it's going to be a state by state by state fight. And even in the pro-life states, I don't know what comes in your mailbox. And I could go into I don't have time for it. But the practices and the whole idea of mail-over abortion is dangerous. They are doing abortions on patients they are not even seeing. I mean, they're seeing them on a screen, but they're not examining them. We have no idea how far along they are in pregnancy. Medication abortions are absolutely contraindicated in the case of an ectopic pregnancy, and the only way you can diagnose an ectopic pregnancy is by doing an ultrasound. And we don't even know their blood type. If the mom's Rh negative and she has that mail-order abortion, she could end up sensitized to Rh, and that can affect all her future pregnancies. They're pushing this hand over fist. It's organizations like Dubuque County Right to Life that's in the forefront. They are the ones out there educating our politicians, going into schools, going into colleges. They're the ones supporting patients in your communities, like Kelly, who need their assistance, but they can't do any of this without you. Without you, it doesn't happen. And the abortion fight does not end no matter what gets decided in Dobbs. So when they come to you tonight, their goal is $150,000. In a room this size, that should be easy, frankly. I've seen rooms this size raise 3 times that much. But their goal is $150,000. And when you come to them, be generous. They are good stewards of your money, and they will take that money and take those resources, and they will save lives. You know, I once was at a dinner, and I had a brilliant ask. My wife and I were giving a speech, and behind the podium was a big McDonald's bag. You know, you couldn't see it from the dinner thing, and I was like, what's that, you know? And they had already done a couple of asks already, but the pregnancy director got up, and she had a baby in her arms that we had been introduced to earlier as one of the babies they'd saved. And she was talking to people about contributing. You know, how many people give $10, you know, go to lunch at least once a month? All the hands go up. How many people here spend at least $10 at lunch? All the hands go up. And then she took that McDonald's bag and put it up on the podium. And she was brilliant. She pointed to the bag. She says, you give me this once a month, I'll give you this. That's the business Dubuque Right to Life is in. Be generous, support them, and fight this because it's the right thing to do. And if the people in the pro-life movement stand up, we can beat this thing. God bless you all, and thank you for your attention.